I am joined with my very good friend Ariya to discuss this important topic today, and we'll be speaking about care and kindness and leadership. And Ariya, these are two important elements in leadership's or a leader's toolbox, and I am looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Really great to be here with you, Enrique, and welcome everyone listening in. Yeah, I reckon let's dive straight into this. And I mean, we were talking before, Enrique, and we were saying that these topics they may sound like the most unnecessary topics for a leader, right? When you're sitting there, you're dealing with your team, you're dealing with all of the challenges, the fires, perhaps. Care and kindness probably comes as the last thing that you want to think about, right? Yeah. Have you seen this? I mean, what's your experience like there?
Yeah, care and kindness is usually looked at as soft skills, things that make you too mushy, right? Too human, and they have no place in the workforce or in corporate. And I'll tell you that the things that hold different items or different issues together in a corporate setting full of people is care and kindness. These
Hmm.
are the things that will take you from having a struggle and a problem and actually coming out on the other side with some great solutions for the whole team.
Absolutely. So that's what I'm intending for us here today. We want to look at this not as like how do you be a good leader or moral or any of these things. This is not about that and not fitting some mold of being a good leader. This is about how do you be effective and how do care and kindness play a pivotal role that you can't remove, yeah, right? So it's literally a puzzle piece, and so for me, working with about 800 entrepreneurs, like we need to be hitting results when you have investors over your shoulder, right? You need to show traction, right? And so what I'd love us to do is really go into this and show people that, okay, this, these are how they play that role and have that impact. Okay. So with that, let's dive into care as one first aspect. And so now in the being profile, care has a couple of aspects to it. On one hand, we are looking at care in more of the traditional sense, where, like, do you actually care about what you're doing? And you can see this. I mean, my favorite one is if you walk into a store and you see all of these people who just don't give a stuff about, like in Australia, I remember actually being in the US, a lot of the retail assistants are quite engaged. They really care for their customers. They greet you, they look at you in the eye, and they say, hey, how can I help you? And they really mean it. Whereas in Australia, now this is a very broad, generalization, but in Australia, a lot of the time someone will be on their phone flipping through Facebook, and then you go into the store and there's no care at all. I mean, this is just at two ends of the different spectrum, right? But you can see it in any region. So this one I think is quite clear, but even though it's clear, I don't see it practiced a lot. That obviously, if you're going to have that type of like customer care, if we put it in that case, it's going to impact your bottom line. It's going to turn into people who love being there. Their experience of going into your organization, your business, it's pleasant, right? And so this one, what we find interesting is in a societal form, this is gradually degrading. Yeah, why? Because this whole thing around AI automation, it's very delicate. On one hand, as many business people, leaders listening into this, yes, we want to look at efficiencies, right? How, for a smaller amount of time and money, can I get the customers to just be happy enough? But I don't think that this is ever going to go away. I don't think that we human beings can live in this purely cold society where everything is ultra efficient. I mean, you look at the Brave New Worlds, and there's lots of different authors and stories that show us that. I mean, where is that going to lead us? Do we just take pills to get around all of this discomfort? Versus that we experience connection and there is real value to that connection. Yeah. So what do you see in this particular space?
It's weird. talking about care, this is not the amorous caring, this is your relationship with what care is. Is it something that you are concerned with to a point where it actually is helping you make some decisions to a positive end, right? And as leaders, as business people, you have to ask yourself, what is my relationship with care in terms of how much effort am I going to put into a particular thing to ensure its success? And when you're a leader or you're or a businessman or a businesswoman, and your relationship with that is not as good as it should be, you will see it show up at your
Mm.
bottom line. You will see it show up as people start to exit your company because they feel and they know that your level of care for any particular thing is not healthy. And so when we're trying to set up is for you to understand that there is a relationship with care, whether you like it or not. It's there. Now you are the one that is the person that actually can do something about it to make it healthy. And so,
Mm.
we've covered care as a distinction in other courses where you can always reference to it, and we'll make sure to put that link to that particular one in the show notes so that you can go back and review that. But caring in this particular instance is your ability to think of something to the point where you develop a number one, develop a healthy relationship with it, but number two, that it also now is impacting whether your leadership is concerned or your business is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you said something in there where I'd say you took it to the edge, which is that people may leave, right? So you mentioned that, for example, if you don't care for your staff, if they don't sense that, definitely that's one of the things that they're going to leave. And that's been surveyed a lot, right? That if you go and survey employees for what matters to them to stay in a team, it's not salary. Salary is far further down the list. It's whether their managers care about them, they acknowledge them, they actually acknowledge they exist, and that there's a real human being on the other side. And that's why you have these things like now. Sometimes it's a little bit too much fanfare, but you have the great places to work and there are people who they are getting a lot more meaning out of being in a team rather than only a paycheck and some labor, right?
I was going to give you an example of one thing that happened to me while I was in the workforce, and a great example in terms of how a leader cared not, right? Cared not. And so in this particular instance, I was in charge of a big project, a couple of sites, and our governing body requested some information. And
Mm,
that information, when the contract was developed, was set to be in a specific format on a specific program that would be readily available. Well, unbeknownst to the governing body, that program was never instituted. It was
mm,
never started. And so when they asked for information, I was the lead and I just said, "Hey, this is not being used. They're asking it for in this format and we can't produce it." And then I told the boss, I said, "You're either going to have to decide to tell them the truth, or we're going to have to produce this in the way that they asked for and you had agreed to."
mm,
Well, he asked me to lie about it. And I said, "Absolutely not. And I'd rather leave right now than ever have you ask me to do that again." So
yeah,
the reason why I bring that example is because his level of care for his bottom line was more than his
yes,
level of care to put me in a position where I could have been jeopardized by contract. I could have been jeopardized by fines. I could have been jeopardized by, and this was a government contract, by prison,
Yes.
all to save his face, right? And so when you're talking about leaders, you also have to understand that as you're executing leadership, you have to care enough for the people that are under you to the point where you do not put them in a place or predicament that they won't be able to survive.
Yeah.
A leader may be protected by this, then the other. In this case, he was a business owner, right? So yeah, you may be able to survive that, but your people may not. And so his level of care or his relationship with care was unhealthy. And he
Mm.
tried to push that unhealthiness on the worker.
Yes.
And obviously I said no and left, and I never went back, but that's one thing to consider in your relationship with care.
Yeah. So if we pull that apart from a being framework point of view, we start with awareness that that care exists. I like to think about it as having X-ray vision goggles on, right? So if you're so naive to the fact that this care is there when you're dealing with human beings, we want to be cared about and we have things that we care for. And so if you are completely naive to that, you want to put that out of your picture, it's extremely difficult to put the equation together to make it work as a leader. And so I think that that was a great example, Enrique, that that person didn't even look at what you cared about, what would matter for you. And so that you could say broke the equation, right? It was ineffective. I think that there's now, this is the whole pattern that I think many listeners going through this program and this course, like they would be getting this idea that once you zoom in and look at any of these aspects of being, there are nuances to it. And one of the nuances for care is the unhealthy relationship with care. We briefly touched on your priorities. Yeah, you mentioned in your story that you have certain priorities, and it was a complete mismatch with your manager. Your manager just wanted to save face, didn't didn't mind to put you in prison, to have you have a fine, all of these things. So the priorities were completely mismatched. Now, in an unhealthy relationship with care, another way it can show up is that we're not clear about our priorities or we're completely unrealistic in our expectations. So, what that looks like can be that you're trying to care for everything, you're trying to do everything. And so, this is another aspect of care that it's a bit odd, I find, for people to connect the dots together right at the beginning because you're like, oh, isn't care just not caring? No, this is about that we human beings, we do care for things, but number two, we have limited resources. We have limited time. Yeah, 24 hours in a day. We can't increase that time. We have limited resources, energy, your physical energy, right? That can take a toll on you, your mental energy, emotional, and so on. So, another aspect to us building a healthy relationship with the reality of care is that we need to pick and choose and put things on a type of hierarchy to go, oh, I care about this more than I can care about all of these things. I mean, look at all of these different important, by the way, initiatives in the world. We have the environment, yeah, we have people's social and emotional, stances. We have product products and economics and so on. There's so many things to care about. No one can go out there and say, okay, I'm caring for everything. Now, what works is that people choose to care for this thing, you see, and then that mission goes out into the world and people choose to care. And then the integrity of our society can then possibly have a chance of coming together and then having things work. Now, what that means for us as leaders. So, again, for me, I work predominantly with fast growing startups. And so, try to do everything in a fast growing startup. It's impossible. There's too many things to do, especially when you have a small founding team. And what needs to happen is that we need to be extremely careful and strategic, going, this is where we're going to put our energy. And that's why I love the term penetrate the market, right? Penetrate means you focus a lot of energy in a small place and you break through. You get through to the next level, right? You make that thing happen. And so this is what we want leaders to be seeing. Yeah, for you as a leader, how do you spread your energy? Yeah. What are you caring for and what are you choosing not to care for? Okay. So a lot of the times we talk about procrastination, but I would even argue that this is a piece of an unhealthy relationship with care because maybe there are some things that you should not be prioritizing, but you keep following this story of, yeah, I should be doing that. I should be doing that. It keeps going to the bottom of your list, right? So a more authentic and a healthier relationship with care would be going, I care for these things, but these other things I actually need to put them, so to speak, on the wayside. Yeah. So what's your experience with this one?
Yeah, and it's important to remember that as you go through the other courses that specifically talk about care, it says that care is considered the epicenter or focal point of being, as without care, nothing of importance can be achieved. And you were just talking about the propensity or the opportunity for a leader to say, I don't care about that too much. Sometimes you can abdicate your responsibility, and that is an unhealthy characteristic of your relationship with care. So, as leaders, just as much as we have all these things that we want to do and should be doing, there are some things that we put to the side that we should care about and are not, and are causing just as equal havoc in our, teams, in our corporate settings, in our bottom line, because just because you can bring someone else to do a job doesn't mean that you'll abdicate yourself from the care portion of that particular thing that someone's doing for you. And so a
Mm,
lot of times we see some of the struggles come from the unhealthy side of caring, by way of, kind of, I don't want to deal with that, nah, I can't do that.
yeah, yeah. And so to map that to some real cases, I mean, what does this look like on the ground, right? If you're in a team, if you're in an organization. So as an example, I was in one of our across a group, a sales team. See, if I see that there's a sales team and they don't care about hitting the sales target, then there's no tactic or strategy that's then going to fix the thing, right? We actually need to deal with, why is there this complacency? Right? Do we actually care to win in the market, to be effective at this? So these are some of the things to be reading once you bring on those X-ray vision goggles and you start reading your team. Then this is something in that epicenter that needs to be addressed first. Another way of saying it, this is why as leaders we need to set that vision, mission, and strategy. Yeah, sometimes in dialogue with the team, but it needs to be set because it tells the rest of the team that this is what we're caring about this quarter, right? We don't just go and disperse all of our energy everywhere. So these are some of the examples that I think uh, live on the ground, you want to be picking up that, oh, there's a gap in care here. And then if I don't stop it, then that's going to have a ripple impact. And, we pack on a lot of other things on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we transition to address kindness, when you think about care, you can look at it from different aspects. Like, I care enough that I value my job enough that I'm going to show up early. Just
Hmm.
a simple example. I'm going to show up early because, number one, I care that I get there safe. So I don't want to rush to work, right? I want to get there in one piece. I want to get back home in one piece. But I also, it's an indicator to my bosses that my care for the success of this company is to the point where I'm going to show up and get myself ready for the execution of my role. When you rush into things, a lot of things slip away. But if I get there just with the simple thing of showing up there early, not only am I making sure that I'm okay for my job, but I'm also making sure that I'm okay for the execution of my role that day to go into it with a clear mind. A lot of that caring comes from my desire, number one, for myself to be successful, but for whoever I am coupled with for the day to become
Mm.
successful.
And I think that, yeah, the last piece here is being aware of the care and then aligning the care. Now that can be for yourself because you actually got me to flash back in, early roles that I've had as I was finding myself, you could say. Sometimes I was in roles where I didn't care about that thing, right? I was seeing it more like a job. And so that has a huge ripple impact. And so, if we do that as leaders and we put people in places where they are doing something they don't really care about, and we're just being invisible to the fact that they have things that they're going to be driven by to fulfill, do you see what I mean? There's a mismatch there, and we end up not capitalizing on a lot of their energy, right? So I think that aligning ourselves, aligning our teams, like essentially it's a an untapped force which anyone can bring about that can then lead to the effectiveness. And that's where it is quite beautiful in terms of it turns then into impacting your bottom line, having higher retention, all of these things, let alone the experience of your workplace, you know?
Yeah, and if you do it as a leader, your people are going to see this and they're more than likely going to emulate it or at least say that I have an example of what that looks like, right? It may not
Yes.
be me right now, right? But I have an example of what that looks like. And it's good enough of an example for me to ponder and say, well, maybe I can do that.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think let's, as you mentioned, transition into the kindness aspect. And, there is some connection, but at the same time, I think quite a lot of divergence. I would start here I remember this personally as I was going into the business world, thinking that is it all about just being ruthless and cutthroat, right? Because that's sort of the antithesis of kindness. So the only way for me to be successful as a leader, I need to be domineering. I need to just push people around. I need to be unethical, even. Like, what's your sense of this? Have you come across that? I would call it a myth.
Well, I don't think it's a myth because we see a lot of this play out in world leaders sometimes, specifically maybe some here in the U.S. But I remember this setting, and as a citizen of a particular nation, having your world leaders on a world platform, sometimes it's a thing of pride. What I saw was a setting, and it was world leaders, and my particular leader at that time literally pushed aside another world leader to get in the front. And I saw that, and what was a moment of pride became an immediate moment of shame
Hmm.
because this particular leader did not treat a fellow world leader with kindness
Hmm.
in the most inopportune moment where all cameras were on them at the stage.
Hmm.
And it shamed me
Hmm.
to even witness this act of no kindness in such a world stage, because at that point, you represent every constituent, every citizen of your nation, right? And so
Yeah.
when I saw that, I really saw that kindness was not valued at that moment.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of people will say, what kind of kindness is this, right? It is the opportunity for you as a leader or as a business person, because we talked about care, right? And
Yeah.
you mentioned it. You have to first be aware that care even exists. You have to be aware that kindness is even a thing, and
Hmm.
then you have to find your place, whether it's you're in a healthy place or you're an unhealthy place with these two. And then once you figure that out, then how do you do more things to be more healthy, right? And in that aspect, in that relationship. But from a leader standpoint or from an entrepreneur standpoint, care allows you to see something. Kindness allows you to act upon what you see.
Mm.
And so that's why they're paired in this particular conversation. And that kindness can lead your team member to a solution, to a hey, yeah, you made a mistake, but so do we all, right? And
Yeah.
that's okay. Tomorrow we'll try this again, and we will learn from these mistakes, and we'll never see them again. And so, how you treat that interchange from the moment that you saw something and then you cared enough to go and treat them, and then now you applying kindness to get them to the other side is
Mm.
so crucial in the way we operate.
Yeah, I think there's actually so much in here. So a couple of points that I would say for us to understand kindness, some related things. I would even go into even a healthy relationship with aggression. Again, and another aspect, okay? Because I would say that one of the misconceptions is it's not about kindness in terms of all the time in all situations. I think that that actually is an unhealthy relationship with kindness, right? If someone is coming to try to murder you and you're just being kind to them or something, or damage your family, I mean, obviously you want to be, doing certain things to minimize the damage and so on. And sometimes being quite, abrupt to someone is appropriate. I don't know if you've experienced this, Enrique, but that whole thing of if your kids are walking into a fire and running into a fire, you yell at them, right? You say, "Hey, stop!" Yeah, you don't gently, right? So the first point here is a healthy relationship, us understanding kindness. It's not just about having that flat in all situations. Now, what I think becomes interesting, this also then connects with forgiveness, which I believe was in the last few episodes you were discussing, because I like to look at if you eradicate that quality, what do things look like? So if you eradicate kindness fully, imagine in your life, like we've all made mistakes. We all have our shadow. And imagine that everyone was not treating you kindly every single moment. It's it's tough, right? So life is tough and we're vulnerable to many things. And so kindness is this, it's an amazing quality. And I think every single person listening, you would remember that moment of kindness that most people have one teacher at least, that you made the mistake, you took the wrong turn, but then they came in and they brought that kindness in and it really touched you, right? It was really meaningful and potentially it turned into something larger. Do you see what I mean? They saw you, they didn't beat you while you were down, so to speak. And so this is the real opportunity of kindness. So again, I think that there is a degree of being situational. It's not just about, okay, let's be kind all the time, that yeah, all of these people are harassing us and abusing us, and let's do that. Sometimes there are appropriate times, yeah, to, show teeth, I would even say, yeah, to say, hey, don't do that. That doesn't work for me. But then, for example, if you have team members and they're trying their hardest and they're not achieving the results, being with them and being that, hey, like, yeah, we all have better days, right? This is the time that you're going through. I'm not going to make it worse for you, right? You still may need to communicate certain things to say, hey, let's make sure this doesn't happen again, let's put this into place. But bringing that warmth and letting people know that you're with them, yeah, you see what they're going through. I think that this ends up building certain deep connections that go far beyond just the standard hurdles and the standard things we deal with. Now, from an entrepreneurial point of view, to me, these things are so important because even if you look at it in a competitive way, don't we want team members who are being driven far deeper to their core, that if problems and challenges come up, we can dig deep and we can move through that. This is why I don't believe in teams where they just go, we're just here only for the profits alone, even if it's an amazing market opportunity. Because inherently, what they're saying is the moment we don't see profits, we're out. We'll go to the next opportunity, right? So even competitively, that doesn't work. Okay. So this is where I would be encouraging, everyone listening in. Yes, there's the kindness. Yes, you might say, oh, that person's good, and let's pat them on the back. And we have this type of social agreement that kindness is good. That's good, but we're not speaking about that. We're speaking that as a leader, if you're not aware that those times to be kind, they actually build the bonds that create your sort of infrastructure, then yeah, I mean, that's sort of a superpower that you would not be tapping into.
Absolutely. And we want to encourage everyone to find out what role care and kindness has in your life right now and how your relationship with these two are. Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? And how are you utilizing it to make yourself the best leader you can be, the best entrepreneur you can be, the best business owner you can be? I want to thank you, Aria, for being with me, and thank everyone for joining us on this episode.
Yeah, thank you, Enrique. Really enjoyed our time. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening in. We'll see you soon.